Hi everyone, welcome back to the White Coat Club. My name is Nicole and I'm one of the counselors at Moon Prep. Today I have Michaela with me, who's another counselor, and we're going to be talking about passion projects. So don't forget to like and subscribe to get more BSMD and medical school advice in the coming weeks. All right, hey Michaela.
Hi, so good to talk to you again.
Yeah, how are you doing?
So good. Busy week with summer program applications this week for underclassmen, and they're also all working on passion projects. So this is a really good time to be talking about all of this.
Awesome. Well, I know it's been a while since you've been on,
Yeah.
so do you want to take a second and just introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, so I've been at Moon Prep for 8 years now. And before I came to Moon Prep, I was an admissions counselor for a Big Ten, like public state university, but also their like honors recruiter for pre-med and engineering. They're like societies, they're pre-med and honor societies like honors, which had less than 50 seats. And so I had some really interesting public state university, but also niche honors experience all wrapped up in the same role. And then I brought all of that information to Moon Prep. And before all of my admissions experience, I worked in magazines, so a lot of editorial work and creative writing. And again, bringing all of that to my students at Moon Prep. So, and really enjoying my time at Moon Prep, especially all the passion projects. And I specifically run Project IQ at Moon Prep, which is a boot camp we run every spring where we talk to underclassmen about passion projects that they can do to really highlight their resumes, as well as resume check-ins to make sure there's no gaps that are occurring as they move forward on their extracurriculars.
Awesome. Thank you. And that was my next thing. I was going to ask you. I know we consider you like the passion project expert here at Moon Prep, and you run Project IQ, and that runs every early spring, right?
Yeah, we're playing around with deciding when we're going to run it next year because some of the information that we talked about with summer programs, it's almost like it came after some of the deadlines for the top summer programs. So we're playing around with when it's going to run next year. But yes, right now it runs from the end of January all the way through February. And that way, no matter what grade students are in, they still have time to launch a passion project before summer, especially if they are in their rising senior year. They don't just want to be launching a passion project, 2 months before they're going to be applying to college. We want to give them at least 6 months, and that's why we picked that timing.
Awesome. That makes sense. So let's backtrack.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, what is a passion project? How would you define it specifically for those who are listening and are not really sure what we're exactly speaking of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that is why I get pulled into a lot of passion project discussions is just because pretty much all of my underclassmen are doing some kind of passion project. And how I talk to my students about passion projects is just simply that a passion project is defined, especially when it comes to how colleges view your resumes, as an independent, self-motivated project that fills some kind of gap. So this is where you're going to be an expert in your local community. And a passion project simply answers the question of, oh, hey, I see that there is something around me that isn't being done, and I'm going to take the steps to do something about it. So that can be medical related. If you like with your local Red Cross group and you do a branch off of it to do your own thing, or it can be non-medical related, but it's just going to show passion for your community and self-motivation. So it doesn't necessarily have to tie into a million things on your resume. It just has to show that you're a passionate individual that will take action when it's clear that action should be taken. So again, it's okay if it's in sports, if it's in music, if it's in something medical related, but you don't have to like force it to be matching the rest of your resume.
Awesome. Yeah, it's almost like a supplement
Yeah.
for everything else that's kind of flowing together. This would be something completely separate, or maybe tying in one or two activities that you're doing, but it's going to be a separate entity on itself.
Yes.
Um, so
Mhm.
why do we stress them so much? I know it's a big deal at Moon Prep. We stress passion projects. I know. So why are they so important to have?
Mhm. So coming from a college admissions perspective, a passion project is the best way to just look a little bit unique to the colleges you're applying to. If you think about it, you know, the students that we share, they're all in a lot of the same clubs. High schools are not that different from one another all across the country. People listening, if you think about your kid and their 10 best friends, they're probably in a lot of the same clubs and extracurriculars. A typical student is in HOSA, some sort of pre-medicine club or research club or something, and then Key Club, a community service club. They're in tutoring, they're in a sport, they're in a musical instrument. And then they might have some shadowing, or internships towards the career that they want. But other than that, resumes kind of start to look the same. And a passion project is exactly where you can kind of start to answer those essays that colleges will ask them later. What's a community that you care about? How have you shown that you care about your local community? That answers that essay question. Plus, it just helps you look unique and stand out. If you think about, okay, 10 resumes that all look the same between different clubs and everything, and then one person has a really interesting passion project where they collected the used tennis balls from their local tennis clubs and they donated those tennis balls to shelter dogs. That's going to stand out among a bunch of, oh, this person did field hockey, this person did lacrosse, this person did basketball, and then they're all in HOSA and they're all in Red Cross. That passion project about just shelter dogs, even if they're going towards a medical career, it will just make them look unique, have some different content to write on essays, and just look more interesting to the college admissions officer.
Yeah, I love how you said that. A lot of our students and a lot of students that you'll be going up against in terms of the competitiveness of admissions are going to have very similar things. So this is kind of that what else? Why,
Mhm.
how you, why you, what did you do specifically? What's going to stand out to you versus, yeah, the students that do host it, which is great, which you should do. And, sports, which are great, and music, which is awesome. But what is going to be unique to specifically you that no one else will have?
Mhm. And this is how I
Awesome.
kind of present it to my students is we talk about the things on their resume that we talk about shadowing, we talk about research, we talk about those as these things check those boxes. So these resume items check those boxes. Now, what are you bringing to the table that is outside the box? Let's work on those too. And that would be a passion project.
I love that. So when is a great time for students to start? So should they already have some items underneath their belt on their resume? Should they start this in like middle school? What's your advice that you typically give?
I tell students, this is a great question because I feel like I get this a lot. I tell students that they can start planning as early as they want and laying the groundwork, in middle school and freshman year. But let's say I have a student that starts working with me in seventh grade, I still have them wait until the summer before 10th grade or sometime during 10th grade to launch it simply because a college resume is going to care about what you did in high school. So we don't really want to have the starting date be earlier than high school. Plus, I like the look of a passion project being on the resume to accumulate hours for a good amount of time, but starting as early as like the first semester of freshman year, that can look a little bit like, how in the world did you know this is what you wanted to do already? It could look a little parent pushed. And so I just like to avoid any shadow of a doubt and have them launch either right before the summer before 10th grade or sometime during 10th grade. That way, your classes in junior year aren't too crazy busy yet, and you're not too close to your college applications. However, if you're just hearing this now and you are in junior year or you're gearing up for senior year, it's never too late, especially with a smaller scale. You don't have to like start a nonprofit and be sending care packages across the sea and all this thing. You don't have to do, you can do a smaller scale thing like the tennis ball idea that I had. Um, you could do that like right before college applications, the summer before senior year is perfectly fine too. I just like it if it can be done earlier. And my preference, if I had a perfect world, would be sometime during 10th grade.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I absolutely agree with what you said about sometimes it can feel a little parent push. I feel like I've absolutely met with students who they come in, they start working with us in ninth grade, and they already have a formal business, like an LLC.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I remember vividly, it was maybe 3 years ago, I spoke to a student, and it was like, well, how did you come up with this? Why are you so passionate about this? And it was very much, mom and dad told me we're going to do this.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So, yeah, we don't want that. We definitely want something that's coming from the student, coming from truly a place of passion.
Yes.
Um, yeah, combining two things. And we're going to get into some examples toward the end. So,
Mhm.
um, okay, so that's when. What about, how you kind of touched on this, but the biggest thing I get from students is like, well, how am I supposed to come up with something? How do I figure out what I'm supposed to do? And then twofold, once I have an idea, how do I actually execute this idea?
hmm Yeah, I mean, exactly where we should go next with this. Love, love these questions. So when I have a student that's brainstorming ideas with me, we always just start with what are they interested in? And that doesn't have to be their future career, just what do they spend their time doing? What do their hobbies, what do they like to do? Again, that's where like the tennis ball idea came in. If obviously that was a student that played a lot of tennis and taught some tennis lessons, was just very into tennis. So just like what do they like to do? What do they spend time doing? And then also talking about their communities and what their community might need. If there is if they live in a city that has a high population of homeless individuals, or this person with this tennis ball idea, um, his area was very like well known for just a lot of dogs being dumped. There's a lot of shelter dogs in his area. Um, and so just kind of like, what are you passionate about? Especially if you are really certain about wanting to do something in the medical field, well, start personally, because again, it needs to be rooted in your own passion, your own personal experience. So, does your family, does your sibling, do your parents have kind of any medical history of something really specific that you want to spread awareness about, or you want to create a project around it? Did you lose your grandparents to something really specific? And then we kind of branch from there. But really, we start with what are you interested in? Where your what does your area, your neighborhood, your community need? And then what personal experiences do you have, again, that you're interested in? We don't want to create a passion project about something that you just feel like you should do it and you have absolutely no passion. That's going to very clearly stand off the page in the wrong way. And then how do you start to execute the idea? Definitely brainstorm with your moon prep counselor. What are my next steps? Um, as far as multiple outcomes. So we don't just want to fundraise and just send the money off to something. We want to show a lot of action. So you should be outlining an idea that has outcomes, especially if you can take things to multiple levels. And we'll talk about that in the examples coming up next. But executing the idea is writing out a plan of what are the next steps and how far can you take this into multiple levels so it doesn't just look very surface level, like, yeah, I put together a business, now I'm done, just showing that you can pour your heart and soul into something. So it should be kind of scalable to go to different next steps.
Yeah, and so much of the execution obviously has to do with what the actual
Yes.
example is, what the actual project is. So I guess probably getting into a few examples might be helpful here
Yeah.
for listeners. So, you know, I've had a few absolutely throughout the years that are always standouts to me, but you're kind of
Mhm.
coming together with things that are passion to you, things that you're already a little bit involved in per se, and then things that are, you know, attainable, and something that you maybe already have connections in, or that you can build connections in. Because if you want it to be impactful, you need to understand and know where the impact is going to be. So that's, if you don't know if there needs to be an impact here, if you're not already involved, how do you know that there's needing to be an impact? So, for
Mhm.
example, um, I had a student a few years ago who he played probably five or six different instruments. He was very, very talented. Um, Additionally, his brother was on the autism spectrum. And because he played music so much and he played music at home, he recognized his brother always, loved his music, really took to his music, had a great interest in his music. And then he decided, so he had two things, his music, his brother. And he decided, well, what can I do with this? So he did some research on ASD and music therapy. He spoke to his brother's teachers at the school that his brother went to. Like all of these resources were readily, kind of available to him. He knew the school his brother went to. He knew the teachers, his parents, helped him out make the connections, and he was able to kind of do something at the school and lead. He was obviously not a music therapist. He was able to lead musical activities at the school that his brother went to. And again, he played all these instruments already, so he didn't need much, from that department. Um, and it's just something that he did on his own. He didn't join it. He didn't, you know, a lot of kids like join a club and just become involved in something that's already happening. He decided to do this on his own. I have another student who she was already volunteering at a nursing home, was already there. And she recognized kind of the loneliness and quietness of the dinners. She was there usually Friday after school, and it was kind of just a somber time. Some people had families come, but it wasn't always like that. So she was thinking, how can I make this more lively? They had a piano. She played piano. She decided, I'm going to start playing and I'm going to take requests. I'm going to do this. And it was just something that she did together. So she turned it into like a mini concert series on Friday nights. It got more people to come down to like the dining area, and it just got more residents involved. And it was just something that she kind of came up with. I know, Michaela, you probably have hundreds. Those are just the two that stand out to me right now.
Mhm.
Um,
I love those
but
though.
really, you're just kind of taking two things and combining them in a way that there's need. I've had students on the flip side say things to me like, we should send toothbrushes to, you know, a random small city in a random country. And it's like, well, what do you know they need that? Why do we know they need that? Like, where is this coming from? Right.
Mhm.
Like, then they're like, we should send something somewhere. We should do this. That is lacking kind of the awareness and the why. It's just something that maybe sounds good.
Yep.
But you don't know there's a need there. These two students knew there was a need. He knew his brother reacted well to music. He
Mhm.
assumed other students on the spectrum would. He did the research to find out that they would. He spoke to the teachers. The teacher said, yes, it would be a great, like the teacher was a professional in, in special education. They said, yes, this is absolutely a need. Go with it. My other student with the piano, she knew there was a need. She was already volunteering there. She saw the the loneliness and the need for some charisma, and she spoke to the professionals there and she added it. So I'll let you kind of go from here. What are some others that students can connect to?
Yeah, I think really looking at the need and what can be done about it is exactly what to look at. I think and this is where how to execute it does really depend on the type of project you come up with. But for instance, my favorite example of how to do a fantastic passion project that, is kind of scalable is a student I worked with a few years ago. She knew she had an interest in like geriatric patients. She wanted to work in like aging medicine. And so, but she also really loved to educate. She really loved public speaking. So she started a community organization, kind of a club, not just at her school, but like across multiple schools. And it was all based around educating um, younger kids in her area about all the job opportunities in healthcare that would have experienced great growth when the boomer generation reaches retirement age and just will create more job opportunities. So she was talking about a lot of job growth, a lot of just career exploration, not trying to only talk to them all about being doctors, but just all the different healthcare positions that would experience growth and talking to them about the pathways to the education levels and pathways to get to these careers. And then um, she was also working with a nursing home. She talked to them about needs that they had, and she kind of combined those two things of job opportunities that are coming down the line with different tools that help the workers at the nursing home she volunteered at. And then she presented her findings at a symposium and wrote a paper about it. So she was able just to scale this up. It wasn't just the club, which would have been enough, but then she took what she learned to the staff at the nursing home, talked to them about tools that they could use to be more efficient and everything and work together with them and wrote a paper about it and then presented what she had worked on as a project. So just multiple layers there. She obviously showed that she was passionate about this. So then when she talks about in her essays wanting to go into geriatric or aging medicine, it all makes sense. She's shown passion. It all just looks like a nice little package that she's giving to the colleges as her resume. And then another example I have is, again, this is more medicine based or healthcare based, but it's not like she was specifically trying to do that from the beginning. It was something that kind of happened along the way. There was a student who was volunteering with her local Red Cross chapter, and she lives in an area where there's a very high homeless population, different homeless communities in her area. And so part of her volunteering with the Red Cross was to go around to these unhoused communities and provide them with necessities. And so she did shifts with them doing this. And while she was doing this, she just started noticing how many babies were among the unhoused individuals. And she just kind of like was thinking about this and putting together some puzzle pieces and just decided, I'm gonna do a little fundraiser, a little bake sale at my church and in my community and raise some funds. I'm gonna put together little packages for new mothers and babies of necessities that aren't being covered. So she just brought a backpack with her to every shift, and she had a few of these new mother or baby kits that had some diapers and some formula and just some other things in there. And she just kept track on a little spreadsheet or her little notebook in her backpack of just how many she was giving out and continued to do little bake sales to support um, refilling the supplies, the packages. And she just kind of did this over a year and a half and gave out a lot of these packs. And it was just a really nice, small scale, but noticing what the people in her city needed. And she just took personal, individual action. And she got into her ED, her early decision school, seamlessly, despite, I would say, lower than the average acceptance at that school because it was a baby Ivy school. And she had lower than average test scores and GPA. And I think a lot of it came from not only the passion she was able to show on her essays, but also this project, I feel like really helped her application. So those are two examples. One is larger scale that went multi-steps, and the other one was smaller scale, but very individualized driven, um, of just examples of things that you can do. And obviously you can see how the planning pieces, the execution of how to bring these projects about would have been very different for these two individuals, but the steps are kind of clear after hearing the examples of probably what they did to put those plans together with their moon prep counselor.
I love those examples. That is excellent. Thank you for that. I think it
Yes.
definitely clears things up, like, smaller scale, bigger scale. So I guess to wrap us up, what is just some general advice that you have for students who are thinking about passion
Mhm.
projects and looking to start one soon?
I think my biggest advice is to think about your outcomes because as Nicole mentioned before, you know, saying, oh, I want to send toothbrushes to some city that I've never visited or something, that sounds like it might be something that a college might want to hear. But if you think about it, it's really hard to quantify. They want to see measurable impact where you have genuinely impacted someone's life. I like to use this example with my new students is I had a student come very, very late in the application season. It was like 30 days before um, the applications were due. This was like 3 years ago. And he joined Moon Prep. It was like 30 days before November 1st. But most of my Moon Prep, the Moon Prep counselors were full, but most of my students were actually done and submitted with all of their November 1st stuff already. So I said I would kind of like take him on last minute and work with him to get him caught up. And he came in and he said, when we were talking about his resume in the very first meeting, he said, I wrote a book about a trip I took, and I changed 27 people's lives with this book. And I asked him how he knew that. Like, how did he know? Like, did he receive 27 reviews on this book on Amazon that said that it changed their lives? And he said, no, I sold 27 copies. And I said, okay, how do you know they read it? How what how do you know it impacted their lives? How do you know they got to chapter 16? Because, well, I don't, but I sold the copies. And I think that that is a really good example of you can do something and feel good about it. Oh, I did something, but you don't actually know the impact that you are having on someone's life. And the impact you're having is what the colleges care about. Um, like they would want him to not just write the book and sell 27 copies, sure, but they would want to take whatever message he had, which I don't know what the message was in that book, but they would want him to go and give speeches about that. And he was able to bring this message to different classrooms or to a TEDx space and like deliver speeches on whatever takeaway the book was. So you want to think about outcomes. If you are saying, I love neuroscience, I want to go into neuroscience. Okay. So my passion project is gonna start a website where I repost neuroscience articles. and that's your passion project. Well, that's not really quantifiable because even if you're going to track metrics as far as people visiting the site, you don't know how long they stayed on the site. You don't know the impact that you had. That's just creating a website. It's not really doing a passion project. You can create a website and then do something more with it. Um, it can be something that's a supplement to your passion project. You have a passion project that also has a website, but the website itself, just sitting there reposting or a blog or something, is not the passion project itself because you can't really measure the impact. Now, the girl who was passing out newborn kits and keeping track of how many she was passing out and how many more she needed to fundraise for. That is measurable impact. She can say, I passed out 67 packs in the year of 2024. That's measurable impact. She genuinely touched their lives 67 times with those packs. The student who had a club talking about future healthcare positions that would experience growth. She had an impact on the number of students in her organization and club. That's measurable impact. Um, so I think just like always, just like we talk about with the summer programs, be thinking about outcomes, not just doing something to do something and being like, all right, I'm done. That's good. That's good enough, but show that you really had an impact and it'll always kind of land better and help you more when it comes to the college admissions process.
Amazing. Amazing. Um, is there anything else that you feel like listeners need to know about passion projects for today?
It's never too late to start a passion project. And so, get with your moon prep counselor right now, right away to brainstorm some ideas and get something launched before summer. This is the perfect time.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course.
And everyone, yeah, everyone, don't forget to like and subscribe for more great BSMD content in the coming weeks.